94% of people in England, Australia, and America, statistically at the age of 65, will follow my dad. They'll either be broke, dead, or reliant on the government. 5% will be financially independent, and only 1% actually ends up being wealthy. And so we decided to create Wealth Migrate with the essence of helping everybody invest like the top 1%. The only difference is you don't need to have $20 million. You can get started from $100 and invest in the same quality assets, earning the same quality return. 10% of $100 and 10% of $1 million is still 10%.
Welcome to Business Without Barriers, the game changer show helping you win in a decade of disruption. I'm your host, Carmen Wild, and today's game changer is fueled by the vision to close the wealth gap, to help 99% of the world invest in the best global real estate like the top 1% can. Scott Picken is the founder and CEO of Wealth Migrate, and I'm so excited to welcome him back to the show today. Welcome, Scott. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carmen. Wonderful to be back online.
Yeah, I know you have a really busy week, so I'm really appreciate the time that you've given to join us again today. And congratulations is in order, I believe. You've just been awarded a Category 1 crowdfunding license by the Financial Services Conduct Authority. Tell us, Scott, why is that such a game changer for you and specifically for investors?
Yeah, look, I think there's two reasons why it's important. And actually, there's three reasons, because it's important for investors, it's important for the industry, and it's important for us. So the first one for investors is that investors, when they invest, they like to invest in regulated products. It makes them feel safe. It makes them feel like the regulator has been through it. So for the last, as far back as 2015, the regulator came out and said crowdfunding is not a regulated industry, and therefore we weren't doing anything wrong, but we also weren't doing anything right, if that makes sense. Yeah. We were like in a gray area. And now the regulation has come out. So for investors, it gives them the peace of mind that it is, in the regulatory space. For the industry as a whole, it's also important because all the financial service providers, most of them cannot participate unless it's a regulated product. It's just the rules and their mandates and everything in between. So it kind of has taken it from a kind of an edgy new age concept to kind of mainstream. And that's important because Fintech is becoming a massive thing throughout the world, and the regulators embracing it now. I believe it's very, very important for the South African ecosystem and even the African ecosystem. And, unfortunately, we are probably 7 or 8 years behind England, which has been pretty much the kind of the best of breed when it comes to regulation. But many other countries, America, Europe, etc., have adopted crowdfunding. Now, to put it in perspective, in England, the two biggest sites there in crowdfunding are one called Cedars and one called Crowdcube. Now, they're actually joining together, and they're going to be bigger than AIM. So you've got the London stock market, and then you've got AIM, which is kind of like the secondary market, and they're going to be bigger than AIM. So they're going to be bigger than the second biggest stock market. That's the impact that it's had over the last 7 years in England. So creating massive jobs, having a big impact on funding new business, on funding new projects, and obviously investors being able to participate in the ecosystem. So I believe it's got a very big impact for the industry as a whole. And then the third one for us is that, if you take those first two, it obviously has an impact because the investors get peace of mind by it being regulated, and we have a much broader market of supply that we can work with that now sees this as mainstream business. So it makes it a lot easier than kind of being risque and on the edge,
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to, maybe you can touch on it a little bit more when you speak about this wealth revolution that you're pioneering through the Wealth Migrate ecosystem. And, on that kind of an ecosystem, how crowdfunding fits into that. So take us into it, Scott. Tell us what you're doing at Wealth Migrate, what this ecosystem is about, and again, why it's such a game changer for the 99% that you want to actually support in terms of global real estate investments.
Well, I think the easiest way to describe it is if I take a step back. It's a bit of a longer story, and I think we spoke about it even on your first interview, so I'll just keep it short. But in simple terms, my dad did what everyone else has been taught to do. He went to school, he went to university, he worked hard, he got a great job, and he started investing, he paid his taxes, and he kind of trusted the financial industry. And yet when my father passed away, he was broke. And when I looked into it, 94% of people in England, Australia, and America, statistically at the age of 65, will follow my dad. They'll either be broke, dead, or reliant on the government. 5% will be financially independent, which sounds pretty good. And if you're in a live room and you ask people, most people put up their hand. But actually, they earn 25% less than their last paycheck. That's the definition of financially independent. So I tend to call that financially trapped. And only 1% actually ends up being wealthy. So we're all running this race, and it's like 100 of us start the race, and only one of us gets to the finish line. It doesn't make any sense. So I decided personally to do it a very different way. I went and looked at it, and 49% of the world's wealth was held in real estate, property. And I started investing in property at a very young age. In fact, did my first project when I was 13, and then what I realized was that more and more people wanted to copy. They also wanted access. And so we started a company when I was 25, or I started a company when I was 25, helping people buy houses, apartments in England, Australia, America, and South Africa. But what I realized was that was residential. And two things happened. In 2009, when we had the last crash, 2008, 2009, the first thing was there was this opportunity in England where we could buy 48 units in Wimbledon. Most people have heard of Wimbledon, the tennis game. And we could buy it at a 50% discount. And it was a huge discount. And, 12% cash on cash returns, fully furnished, fully tenanted. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. There was one little problem though. I needed £10 million pounds, sorry. And, I ran around, I had 2,500 investors, and I just couldn't get them to work together. And so I thought, no, this is ridiculous. We need to have a technology platform to bring people together to have the buying power of the institutions. And the second thing was, I was in Australia and I was with two very wealthy men, and they were buying medical buildings. And I was like, why medical? No one's ever told me about medical. And, it was again, I spoke about this in the last series, but it was doctors never leave their premises. They're economically resilient no matter what happens, which is funny with the whole COVID thing now. And thirdly, they're very good at being doctors, but they're not good at, accountants. So they pay very good long-term leases. And again, I was like, this is a no-brainer. Why has no one ever taught me this? And so the essence of those two stories is that what I realized was that wealthy people, the top 1%, are investing in asset classes that you and I don't even have access to, or to be fair, don't even know about, let alone don't have access. And so we decided to create Wealth Migrate with the essence of helping everybody invest like the top 1%. The only difference is you don't need to have $5 million or $10 million or $20 million. You can get started from $1,000. You can get started even from $100 and invest in the same quality assets, earning the same quality return, obviously proportional, but 10% of $100 and 10% of $1 million is still 10%.
I like the way you've given us those stories again, and even I've seen it from a different angle, even though I've heard you say it before, because what it also looks like is that, one of my questions to you would be, Scott, how does someone wake up one day and decide they're going to close the wealth gap? Other people are going to tell you, well, are you just smoking something? How do you do that? But it's you coming across certain things along your path, the possibilities firing up in your mind, and you're asking the questions, and then just doing something about it. So it sounds to me like it's not something you just woke up one day and decided. Your path was sort of guided towards that. Am I hearing right? And you just took the opportunities as they came along.
Yeah, I think if I understand your question correctly, it kind of feels like a bit of a passion and a purpose. So
Yes.
I always like building things, and I think really the impact of my dad's story had a defining impact on my life. And so it's been more like, I tend to joke with people, I'm a one-trick pony, and what I mean by that is that, I did my dissertation in 1998 on how technology was going to change the construction and property industry, and so both at a theoretical level, at a studying level, I've always been interested about marrying together kind of property and technology, and and have been doing that now for 23 years. That's why I joke I'm this one-trick pony. and then at a purpose level, obviously the impact of my dad, had a huge impact for me. I think there's probably a third thing. When you grow up in Africa, two parts to it. One is coming originally from Zimbabwe, you have to diversify. You just can't have all the eggs in one basket. It just doesn't work like that. And secondly, we see the wealth gap every single day in South Africa. And so, I tend to joke when you're in Europe or England or America or Australia, they talk about the wealth gap, and it's, these poor people that live in houses with DSTV satellites outside their house, they don't really understand what poverty is. Whereas we do, we see it every single day. And what I find most interesting is that when people think about poverty, most of the people that are listening to this are not in that, well, all of them are not in the bracket that they think about. But then I challenge them and I say, well, when did you last invest in a medical building? Or when did you last invest in a structured note? Or when did you last buy not just one apartment, but the entire building? Or when did you last, get involved in the development in Portugal? And I can keep going, okay? And the answer is probably none of those, okay? And then they have to realize that they're still investing like middle-class investors. And if they invest like middle-class investors, they're going to, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you've always got. Yes. And statistically, they're going to follow the stats. So, I tend to joke with the wealth gap, everyone tends to think it's them. But what people start realizing is it's not them, it's us.
Sure. That's a sobering thought, Scott. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly it. We don't think like that. And we think we're okay, and we think we have time, and we think that we can somehow race to that finish line. And your company is helping us show, helping show quite differently. So give me a little bit more. Yeah.
But I do want to answer your question, though. I also don't think you solve the wealth gap by empowering 1 billion people at a time.
Yeah.
I believe you solve it by empowering one person at a time.
Yeah.
And, I think whether you invest $1 million or whether you invest $100, I find it fascinating that I can see the light bulbs come on when someone becomes a global citizen. And what I mean by that is that once they start investing and they start realizing, okay, they're investing in first world assets, they're earning a first world income. And, if you're getting 10% on $100, that's only $10. That's not going to change your life. But if you change your habits, you can change your financial destiny.
And is your ecosystem helping change those habits? Is that why you've created an entire ecosystem with so many supports mechanisms?
I'd like to think so, yes. So, because I actually believe there's 6 steps that each investor needs, or 6 needs that each investor needs. The first one is belief. And, Henry Ford says it best. He said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Yeah. And so, the problem is that if someone doesn't believe it's possible, then everything else is a waste of time. The second thing is they need the knowledge. And, I'm happy to share a graph if you want me to, just on this, because it's quite visual if you want me to share it with people.
Go ahead. That'd be great.
I'll do that. I can share my screen because it'll probably make a little bit more sense if I share my screen now. Okay. So the first thing is the belief, and it all starts in the head, basically. The second one is knowledge. And what you've got to be very careful of is, funny enough, I've got this book sitting next to me, but it's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Most people have heard.
Yeah.
And, you got to be careful you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, which is where you think to yourself, I don't know enough, I can't get started. Because that's also not the truth. I believe nowadays you can learn while doing. The third is access and investment. Like, you actually have to get started. I always joke with people, Carmen, you probably heard me say this, but no one ever learned to walk by reading a book.
Yeah.
At some point, you gotta get going. Then you need a system. Whether you use our system or someone else's system or your own system, it doesn't matter, but you need a system to track your investments and know how you're doing. The third is you need support and accountability. And, the sixth is ultimately success. And for me, success is results and wealth and ultimately the word freedom. And what most people think is that it's a linear kind of, one-way process, but it's actually not. It's an upward spiral, because as much as you start getting success, you're going to start getting more belief, you're going to get more knowledge.
Yeah.
And so with this framework, what I think is very, very important here is that you can start with $100 or you can start with $1 million. It's the same thing, because you're going to go through all of these 6 steps in a logical way. And once you start to see it working and it comes back here, you're going to do it more and more and more again, and I mean, just if you don't mind, I'll share a quick gift because we've all read that Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, almost without credit. And, you've got this employee mindset, you've got the self-employed kind of mindset, you've got the business owner, and you've got the investor. And I tend to say to people that, people that are in the employee section are often beginners when it comes to investors. The self-employed have kind of generally started or trying to do something, and they're in the intermediate. The business owner is often, quite advanced in it. But each and every one of them is wanting to be here, which is a global, citizen, a global investor, diversified across income, assets, currencies, partners, etc. I think the important part is that what I'm just trying to show people is that in the old days, 20 something years ago, I read this book and had to run out and kind of go and buy houses. But what I learned was that that's very middle class thinking. And nowadays with technology, we can go up the value chain. We can invest like the top 1%. And if we're at the beginner stage, we can start with $100. And if we're at the intermediate stage, we can start with $1,000 to $10,000. And if we at the advanced stage, we can start with $100,000 plus dollars. It doesn't matter, but each and every one of us can go far quicker to source and become that investor without all the hassle that you previously didn't have. Or sorry, that you previously did have.
Yeah, so make it a little bit more real for us, Scott, for people who are not familiar with your the product that you actually offer. So you've that those steps that you've shown are actually covered in every single part of the kind of very smart technologies, very smart platform that you've put together for investors. So if you could just give us an idea. So someone comes onto your platform, and from as little as $100, they literally have access to global real estate investment opportunities. If you could just give us a little bit more of that.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm just trying to get you up another slide here quickly, because I think there's 2 things I'd like to show you basically. The first one is just visually seeing it. So what you basically got in a traditional marketplace is you got supply. So you got kind of quality partners on the supply side. And then this could be in England, Australia, America, Europe, whatever, even South Africa. And these are quality partners. They then list their products. So rather than buying an apartment, you buy the entire building in London. And then you and I come along and we've got direct access to quality partners and quality opportunities. And then there's 4 simple steps. We sign up to be able to view the deals. We select the investment. We also KYC and kind of fund our wallet. We can transact online and we manage our entire portfolio in one place. It's really that easy. And if I was to go here quickly and literally log in, because I don't think there's anything more powerful than actually seeing it. I don't know. Do you want me to do a quick demo?
Yeah, you can do a 1-minute demo, given that's what it takes.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I've logged in now. You should be able to see it. All I was showing is you can have different entities between your personal name and different offshore structures. You can go and you can see your wallets. You can see it in multiple different currencies as well. And then in simple terms, you can go in, you've got real estate investments. So as an example, this is a deal at the moment in Portugal with John Robbie. So, I mean, John Robbie's the guy who's behind Century City. He's probably the most successful developer in Cape Town. I mean, you can literally go in and invest alongside him from $100. This corporate park here is with Feltman Equities. They're a 40-year-old company. They've got billions and billions of dollars under management. This is in Fort Lauderdale. If people don't know Fort Lauderdale, but it's a very, very wealthy area in Florida, basically. And you can invest, directly alongside them, or you can go into alternative assets with things like structured notes. But let's just say that I want to go in and I like this one. I'm not going to go into all the detail because we don't have it now. But I mean, I can read through, I can see all the financials, I can go read about the risk, I can download the documentation, it's all here. And by the way, I can also go and put in a calculator and see exactly what the fees are. There's complete transparency. So, not the old way of doing it where everything's hidden. And you literally, let's say I want to invest in this deal. I go in, I say, right, I'm going to invest $1,000. I acknowledge that I've read everything. I obviously download the docs, like we all do. And effectively, I've now invested in less than a minute in Fort Lauderdale.
That's crazy.
And if I go to my portfolio, I can go and basically see all my investments. I can see my pending investments. You can see I've invested in Portugal. I've invested in Florida. You've got my investments kind of alongside it. You can see all my previous investments, and then I can go and look at it in whatever currency I want, my different wallets, etc. So, for me, Carmen, I think the most important thing is that if we go back to those 6 steps, the belief and the knowledge we take care of with the Wealth University. So we've got a whole lot of products and training where people need the belief system and the knowledge to be able to succeed. And then steps 3 and 4, which is the accessibility and the investment and the system of, I've just shared that with you. And then kind of the ongoing coaching and accountability. I believe that comes more through community than anything else. So there's a great stat that came out from Deepak Chopra, where if you try to do something on your own, you've got a less than 50% chance of succeeding. If you do it with a business partner, a husband or wife, you've got about a 60% chance of succeeding. Whereas if you do it in a like-minded community, you've got a higher than 70% chance of succeeding.
Wow. Yeah.
And, so these are the things when you talk about the system, there's different parts of the system which I believe are important to help each investor on their journey.
And if we put it into perspective, if a fair amount of people who are watching this would have at some point invested in property, and we know what it takes to invest in property locally, never mind globally. What you've just shown us is an absolute game changer, to go onto a platform and to literally through a few clicks to bypass all the freaking crazy hoops that we have to go through is just incredible. And that's how you're making it so accessible to literally the 99%, as long as if they have at least that minimum amount that you bring down constantly, the minimum investment. Where are you down to now, Scott?
Well, $100. So you can actually see there that the minimum one on the Portugal deal is $97. And the logic is that the fees are 3%. So it's $100 investment you're participating, But I think, Carmen, it is quite important because you mentioned the 99%. We did originally start with the 99%, but we've actually changed that lingo to everyone. Because my attitude, if you've got $1 million or even $10 million, the chances of you going to America and investing in alongside a Feltman or whatever are like zero, literally zero. I mean, and again, I speak from experience here. Unless you arrive in America with $100 million cash and quite a lot of track record, you're nobody. Like you don't exist. You might think you're a very big fish in your town or your country, but you're not that big in the bigger picture of the world. And so we actually changed it from the 99% to everyone, because using the technology, whether you're investing from $100 or whether you're investing, $5 million or even $10 million, you get the same outcome. And what I think is also important is that if you take Ray Dalio, and I presume your listeners know who Ray Dalio is, but just in case you don't, go and check him up and go and read his book, Principles. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And he's talking a lot. I mean, he's probably the financial commentator I listen to most in the world right now. He seems to make the most sense. And he says, the number one principle that we need to do in this current market is to diversify across countries, across currencies, across assets, and across partners. And why I believe this is really important is that even if you've got $10 million, I believe it makes far more sense to invest $1 million in 10 deals than $10 million in one deal.
Absolutely. And so your platform is allowing even though it's real estate, it's allowing to do, like you say, cross geography, cross currencies, whatever it is, and different deals as well,
Well, it's not only real estate now, because we've, as you saw on the platform that I showed you.
Yes, I saw that.
I mean, we've got a green energy project coming. We've got a solar project coming. We've done private equity. We've done convertible debt structures. We've got a structured note at the moment. So, really from again, back to a Ray Dalio perspective, you actually are now getting access to all, there's two different things here. And again, it's a funny language that I've only learned in the last year or two, where secondary markets are stock markets. They are listed structures. And we don't do secondary markets, but what we do is primary markets. So anything that is kind of not through a stock market, so be it real estate, private equity, convertible debt, green energy, etc., they're all primary market stuff, and we allow people to participate. And coming back to your point, Carmen, those were traditionally the hardest things for people to invest in because they were off market. You've got to set up the bank account, set up the structures. It's very, very tricky, and trying to organize your own finance and everything in between. Then actually owning the asset is extremely difficult. You've got to manage it. Your long distance relationships, everything. It's extremely tough. Whereas with the technology and the platform, it's become a lot easier. Now you can get access to these opportunities in a much safer way, and you can manage them in a much simpler way. So we call it much safer and simpler than the previous model. And again, whether you've got $1 million, $10 million, or $100, it makes your life a lot easier.
So to just round up this, the giving people an understanding of what they're getting with your ecosystem, what would be one or two reasons that you would say, at least check this ecosystem out? Why should people want to? I'm sure there are other ways that we can, they can invest in property a little bit simpler than doing it themselves. But I know why I want to be part of your ecosystem, Scott, but I'd like you to explain why.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because your whole series is around the digital disruption over the next 10 years. And I think as investors, we can acknowledge that the world is changing. The way we invest is changing. The way we buy is changing. The way we gather information is changing. Literally everything around us is changing. And there's only really two options we've got. We can watch it happen, or we can be part of it happening. It's literally that simple. And so my attitude is that, to some extent, there's a huge benefit in dipping your toe. And even if it's, you don't have to bet the farmhouse to get going, but dip your toes, start to realize how it works. My personal story is that I own 16 properties, residential houses or apartments. And when I did the maths, took all the emotion out of it, just did the maths, my 16 properties were getting a lower return than my investments on the platform. Wow. And were a hell of a lot more hassle. So I had more hassle, less return, or low hassle, more return. It was like a no-brainer. So, for me, the first lesson would be dip your toe. And like me, when I personally, I know I'm part of creating the platform, but just for my own personal investments, it made more sense. And the second thing that I think is critically important is it is a mindset shift, because if you are buying houses or apartments or even commercial buildings, you tend to do it where if you're from, let's just say Joburg, the chances are you're going to be investing in Joburg. If you're from Cape Town, you're going to be doing in Cape Town. If you're from Mauritius, you're going to be doing in Mauritius. And I believe that that whole mindset needs to change dramatically now. You know, you've got to think like a global citizen. You've got to start investing around the world. You've got to start deploying your capital to where you see the long-term fundamentals making sense. And the only way, in my opinion, is to do that online, because we just don't have the time or the energy or the money, for that matter, to fly all over the world and be setting up structures and bank accounts and managing it. It's just a nightmare. So for me, I believe that fundamental mindset shift has to happen for people. And, you know, what better thing than to be a global citizen and to live wherever you want, send your kids to whatever school or whatever university. And if you choose to live in the emerging world, like I do, I choose to live in South Africa, not because I have to, but because I want to. But yet you've got offshore assets with an offshore income. You know, that's utopia, you know, and that's what I tend to refer to as freedom. So my question to people is, how important is your freedom?
Nice question. Thanks for that, Scott. And yes, if you haven't checked it out yet, really, it's worth your while. Like Scott says, just go check it out. Just dip your toe, and you don't even have to dip your toe. You can just check it out for a while and see if it's for you. And to be able to be a global real estate investor with such easy accessibility and convenience, and be part of the community. And I think that's the big thing is I'm part of Scott's community, and there's just so much wealth of knowledge. People are backing each other, looking out for each other. And to my mind, this is how we win in a decade of disruption. And we have to do it. We have to win together. So, but yeah, so Scott, thank you for that.
Sorry, Carmen, it's so important because you asked me for a quote. And it's one that I heard a while ago from someone, where most people still have a 20th century mindset, which is around competition. Yes. And it's no longer about competition, it's about collaboration.
Yes.
And, you know, you know, it's a thing that I heard a couple of years ago that I love, because it's not about competition, it's about collaboration. And it's a shift from scarcity to abundance.
Totally, and I agree with you, and that's what this show stands for. In fact, our vision is to make collaboration the new competition. And I think if we have that mindset, we'll go so much further, because we're doing it together. And with that, it's like your crowdfunding, you know, getting the license for that. It's all moving towards that collaboration rather than competition, and we can do so much better together. But we've got to. It's not about win-lose anymore. It's about winning together. And that is the only way we can actually do this. So thanks, Scott, for that. It's time for your whiz bomb. So the whiz bomb here on Game Changer is, in 60 seconds, I've asked Scott to tell us the smartest piece of advice or realization that literally left him in awe when he got it. So go for it, Scott. What's that?
I think for me, it's probably a partnership. And what I mean by that is that the fastest way to success is to copy successful people. I tried to read books and read autobiographies and everything else. But what I realized is there's an even faster way than copying successful people. It's partnering with successful people. So you can go and, you know, spend the 20 years figuring it all out yourself, or you can just partner with people that are already doing it. And, you know, I think when you've got skin in the game, you take a far bigger, you know, knowledge of what's happening. So, you know, it's all good and well to go and read about this stuff, but none of us ever learned to swim or walk by reading a book. And you can get started now by partnering with others that have done it for decades.
Fantastic. So it talks right into the collaboration again. And I know you've got partners all around the world, and you've literally you've actually been able to not only start, implement, but really create a dent already in terms of this closing the wealth gap. And you've done that through partnerships around the world. So it's testimony to what you're doing. So one of the things we want to do on this show as well, Scott, is to really allow the BWB family to become a lot more alert in terms of what's coming. and you're a game changer as you're in the markets, you're out there, you've got your ear to the ground, you're speaking to people around the world. Please share with us two things. What you believe the most exciting disruption is that you foresee in the coming decade that could impact business or life as we know it. And then the converse of that, one of the most concerning disruptions you foresee that we need to really be aware of so that we can de-risk our business. If you could share that with us, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, look, it's a how long have we got type conversation, but
exactly.
The one that I've been most interested in for the last 5 years or so is blockchain. And when one looks at blockchain, I think it's going to have as big an impact, if not a bigger impact, than the internet itself. If you take what the impact the internet's had on you in the last 25 years, and I say you and all your listeners, I think blockchain is going to have a similar impact. You know, it just cuts out all the middlemen. And I mean, we're at such an early stage in where it's going. People think blockchain, you know, everyone's heard of Bitcoin now, but what they don't realize is that Bitcoin is the currency that's built on top of the technology called blockchain. And so imagine if everything was able to be decentralized without middlemen. You don't have to trust banks, you don't have to trust deeds officers, you don't have to trust governments because there's, you know, no middlemen. And I think it's going to have a very big impact. How that's going to happen, this is where I get a little bit confused myself. And I was quite an early adopter in cryptocurrency and everything else. But it sort of ties in with your second question, which is, you know, what's the biggest, what your question was something along the lines of, what's the biggest negative that I see? And I see a huge amount of chaos as governments and central banks and regulators try and fight to hold on to the status quo. So just to put that in perspective, so let me give you a perspective of what I'm talking about. So in the property game, if you do an NFT, which is a non-fungible token, or you put a property on the blockchain, you basically don't need a deeds office. There's no need for a deeds office. Now, are governments and countries going to allow their deeds office to be put on a private blockchain that has nothing to do with them, and or private currency? You know, like in China right now, they're coming out with the Chinese Bitcoin, if you want to call it that, but it's regulated by the government, which kind of is an oxymoron in itself because it's not supposed to have someone regulating. But the point being is that I see this being a massive disruption over the next, I actually don't know if it's a decade or longer, as the old world holds on to what they used to and the new world kind of, you know, evolves. And, you know, I heard a funny thing in China years ago where innovation has to outpace regulation. So the logic is that they have to innovate faster than the regulators can keep up. And so for investors, I think the opportunity lies in the disruption. It definitely lies in where the world's going and understanding these big waves. And it's really important, you know, when you look at exponential technologies, there's 16 of them: artificial intelligence, big data. We've all heard it before, robotics, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to go and learn about all of them, but you do have to find ones that you're interested in. And then you need to kind of start to follow it and understand it. And that's where the opportunity lies. The negative side is, as I've said already, is how governments and regulators and banks are going to fight against it. And a classic example is that on our platform, we had cryptocurrency. I mean, you could literally invest in a building using Bitcoin. And we were shut down by the banks. And our third-party payment provider, so it's called a payment service provider called Lemonway, which is the biggest in Europe, by the way. I mean, they do billions of euros per year. They deal with the top 5 banks in Europe. And those top 5 banks said if anyone's using crypto, then they won't support them. So it's exactly what I'm saying. Like, it's not a fair game. Like, you can't have both. Like the old world saying pick, very much the competition mindset. And the new world's going, no, but we should collaborate. And I don't quite see how that bridge is going to get crossed, because at the moment it seems to be rising tension.
So how do you navigate that in your world where you are constantly needing to, like, deal with that tension?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't necessarily know the answer, because I was quite surprised in 2017 and 2018 when we came out with a cryptocurrency, how strong the old world was against change. And what we realized is you can build a platform for the future, but you need to eat in the present. Yeah. And so it is a real challenge. I think from our perspective, you've got to do both. And you've got to deal with mainstream at the same time as knowing where the future is coming from. And I think, again, this comes back to the very word I've used a number of times today already, which is diversification. You've got to be looking at different options. And then the last thing that I think is really important is that, having, quite close to our borders is Zimbabwe, and having watched them go through financial chaos, it was really interesting watching the assets that still performed in Zimbabwe. And there are good quality assets that still provide good quality income. And whether you're getting paid in US dollars or pigs and goats, it doesn't matter. You're still getting paid. People will always find a way to transact if you've got something of value. And so, I think one thing, Carmen, that I think everyone needs to keep in mind is that it's all good and well to be very new agey, but Bitcoin can go to naught. It literally can go to naught. It can go to $1 million, but it can go to naught. And I do think there are assets, intrinsic assets, that people will always need no matter what happens in the economy. They need a house to live in, with a roof over their heads. They need hospitals if they're sick. They need schools, for their children. Now, whether everything's going to go online, I think we've learned with COVID that most parents would quite happily send their kids to school. So, I think my point being is that still keep your eye on human needs and long-term trends. And I think if you balance those two out, then sustainable energy is another one. And if you balance those out, sorry, just quickly, there's another deal that we've got coming on the platform, which is a logistics park. And with e-commerce, they all need logistics. So it's about future-proofing long-term trends that I think are really, really important. And if you do that along with all the new age stuff, then you're probably going to balance yourself out fairly well.
So what I'm hearing you saying is learn to play in both worlds. It's not an either or game at this point in time. Play in both and be surrounded by people that are really understanding how this is working and changing as we go. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Scott?
I think so, yeah, and well summarized. I think it's very important. There's a great interview which I highly recommend with Jeff Bezos around Zappos. So if you just Google Jeff Bezos Zappos, and it's literally 7 or 8 minutes long, and he talks about the 4 things he knows. And the one is always focus on the customer. The second is always focus on long-term trends. The third is it's never either or thinking, it's and both thinking. And the fourth is every day is day one. And I mean, and like he says, those are the 4 things he knows. And so if we take that into concept, and obviously he's talking from business, but we take it into our personal lives, it is about long-term thinking, and it is about, and both thinking. And the last thing you've said, which I completely buy into, is that you're going to get there a hell of a lot faster in a partnership, or even better in ecosystem than you are on your own. And that's where, from Wealth Migrate's perspective, we actually use the word migrate with the concept of animals, where a bird can fly 70% further in a flock than it can on its own. And so again, you can go into this next decade all on your own and try to figure it all out yourself, or you can be part of like-minded communities that, in my opinion, are going to get you there a lot faster with a lot less energy.
So to round it up, maybe you can give it to us in a start-stop, in light of what we've just said. What should entrepreneurs start and stop doing to enable them and to empower themselves to really thrive over this very turbulent time that we're in?
So the stop one's easy. The stop one for me is don't hang around negative people, and stop kind of listening to the news and the press. And again, these are all cliches. We've all heard it 100,000 times, but there's just no value in hanging around the negativity. So for me, it's stop focusing on the negatives. And to start, it's focus. I love what I learned from Richard Branson, and that's that it's solve people's problems. If you're solving people's problems, then you're going to have a long-term, business. And so I love that concept from Zig Ziglar. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. And so, my attitude is focus on where you want to get to and why you want to get there. And if you're clear on the why, then the what and the how will come. And the only other thing I would say is partner, learn, invest. You've got to be, Roger Hamilton's got a great saying, which you need to be a leading learner. And what he's basically saying by that is that you can never know enough. And not only once you've learned something, you should be teaching others, because the whole concept of, one of the fastest ways to learn something is to teach others. So, start being a leading learner, and you've just got to be in an environment and ecosystems where you're learning. And that can't just be in the town, the country, the city that you're in. It's got to be at a global level. You've got to be playing with the best of breed people around the world. And I'll leave you with one thought, but I've heard this now from multiple different people. So it's really interesting concept, is that you no longer have to go and create Tesla. You can buy shares in Tesla, and you can kind of learn, and be part of the Tesla journey. You don't have to buy shares in Apple or Google or sorry, you don't have to go and start those companies. You don't have to, start a Wealth Migrate or any of these type of things. You can actually now participate alongside them and learn in the journey. And in the past, everyone thought, oh, well, I'm not Jeff Bezos, I can't go and create an Amazon. That's rubbish. You can be part of it now. And the one thing that I think is important is that, you can't do everything. So find what you love and then partner with people that love other things.
Such a nice way to round it up. Thank you, Scott, and thank you for being on the show again and bringing us this wisdom again from a same and different perspective again, which is really nice. And what I can safely say, I'm very happy to say to everyone, is Scott's been in this game for a long time, and he's been disrupting his market for a long time, and what he walks the talk. So whatever he shares with us, he's either found it out the hard way, done it himself, or partnered with people to find it. So thanks for sharing what you have today again, Scott. And
unfortunately, Carl, it's more of the hard way than anything else. I can tell you more things that don't work than things that do.
But at least, you know what I love, Scott? You're still standing to tell the story. You don't stop. You keep going, and that's what it takes. And that's what I admire about you, is you just keep going, because it's a freaking tough industry, and we're hit at all angles in so many different ways at the moment. And if we're not surrounded by amazing people, we're just not going to be able to withstand it. So kudos to you for taking the hits and keep going. And I appreciate you really sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, and thanks to your listeners. And my final comment is that we've all heard it before, but Margaret Mead said, it doesn't take a lot of people to change the world. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but a small group of committed people can change the world. And so, if you want to think like a disruptor, think about how you would like to see the world being, and then figure out a way to make that happen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott. And thank you for watching and listening to this episode. I truly believe we've heard it quite a number of times over in this episode. Winning together is how we're going to thrive, how we're going to succeed. And so join the BWB family, hit the subscribe button. If you like this episode, if it was of value to you, hit the like button, and please share it. Let's share the love, and let's play a new business game together where we play and prosper together. So until next time, sending you oceans of love from Mauritius. Cheers.